Mr. McGee, don't make me angry. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
You are about to listen to the Totally Super Awesome 80s Reboot Overdrive podcast.
This podcast is our fan tribute to the Incredible Hulk TV show. Be advised that has been exposed to radiation and we caution to listen at your own risk. You have now entered GammaCast.
Hello and welcome once again to GammaCast. I'm your host, Charlie Esser, and with me as always is...
Phil Parrish.
Hey Phil, glad to have you as always. Tonight's episode is The Confession, directed by Barry Crane, writers Kenneth Johnson, developer of the series, and Deborah Dean Davis. Well, that explains why we had such a strong female lead. And good to see once again that the Incredible Hulk is really kind of building the bridges for a diversity of voices in the television community.
Mm-hmm.
McGee reluctantly takes on an intern as his assistant, who takes an interest in a lonely little man claiming to be the Hulk. David Beeman worries if the man might actually know his secret. Bum, bum, bum. Big moment for 80s stars. Now, of course, the 80s star everyone knows as Pamela Morris is... Phil?
Markie Post.
Markie Post, yes, the Markie Post of Night Court fame. I am still so mad that Daredevil, now that Matt Murdock's working Night Court, hasn't put more Night Court jokes into it itself. I understand there's a limitation in space, and they do have to tell this whole story in Daredevil in the middle of Civil War, but for goodness sakes, you put a man in Night Court. We need to have Markie Post, a John Larroquette, a Harry Anderson, and now I'm going to be horrible because I'm just going to call him Bull Shannon. I'm forgetting the actor's name.
I forget his name too, but
in that comic book panel,
at least give us a Mel Torme song, something.
They give us something, yes. But now, and this was great because, of course, our other big 80s star, possibly one of the biggest 80s stars of the 80s, if you ask me, at least when I was a kid in the 80s, is Barry Gordon, who plays Harold Milburn. And Harold Milburn's credits include, okay, let's get them all in here. In 1981, which actually isn't even so. Let's see here. So, his first major thing in the 1981, he plays Captain Marvel Jr. and Freddie Freeman on the Kid Superpower Hour with Shazam. Whoever remembers that, you are one of my fellow heroes. It was a great series. It was cut between cartoons of the Shazam family, Captain Marvel Jr., Captain Marvel, Mary Marvel, and the Tiger Man character, which you never questioned. Well, actually, I always questioned why there was like a humanoid tiger in this thing, but and then it also was interspersed with also this faux rock band of 80s teens. Or probably guys in their 20s and 30s playing teens who all wore tights. And then they all had their own likenesses put in a cartoon, which was Superhero High. Very cool. I loved it, man. For that whole season it was on. He was Clyde in Meatball and Spaghetti. Meatball and Spaghetti was a great cartoon. I can still remember the theme song. I believe Clyde might have been their actual roadie, or maybe just an extra character. But I saw Meatball and Spaghetti, and it's just one of those classic things. Meatball was the fat guy. Spaghetti was the he's the only one that's getting your credit on IMDb here for it. Clyde in an unknown episode in 1982. But the dog played the drums. Spaghetti, who is the wife of Meatball, who's the big fat guy, was that's Meatball, and then there was another guy who played bass. Spaghetti, of course, plays the keyboard, and their dog plays the drum. It was your classic 80s cartoon. He goes on. I'm sorry, there's just a lot here. He's the voice of Inky in the Pac Preview Party, Christmas Comes to Pac-Land. In the eventual Pac-Man TV series, he keeps on playing Inky.
Mm-hmm.
He played Gary Rabinowitz in Archie Bunker's Place.
Yeah. I thought he does.
Oh yeah, no, this guy's been around. The second I saw him, I was like, oh man, this guy's all over the place.
I knew I recognized him from stuff, but I couldn't put my finger on any of it.
In the Pole Position cartoon, he was in 13 episodes as the voice. I don't remember exactly what he did in that one. I remember Pole Position cartoon. He was Rob American Rabbit and Punk Jackal in The Adventures of American Rabbit. He was Junior Wentworth in the Snorks, kids. I know if you're listening to the 80s reboot, you know who the Snorks were. And he was Junior Wentworth himself for 65 episodes. Reggie Moonshroud in Gravedale High, which I don't remember. That's actually when we get to the 90s. So we'll stop there. But the guy just keeps on going on and on. He was in Batman the Animated Series as Sheldrake. He was in a series called Civil Wars. He was Mel Wittenauer. He was in the SWAT Cats. He was in the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. This is from 1987 to 1986. He was in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He was the 80s Donatello and the 80s Bebop, as well as the Blue Android. And yeah, so Barry Gordon, honestly, one of these great actors for whom the 80s reboot was made, just so we can honor him. And here he is right now in The Incredible Hulk on the original air date of May 4th, 1979. Okay. So that's that. Now let's get to the actual story, because we do have one here. So we open up with David. He's at a computer lab at a hospital. He's experimenting on himself, as David Banner does, as Bruce Banner does, because, you know, what else you're going to do when you're a superhero? Although, and actually, speaking of superheroes, we're going to get into this in a minute, because I think this episode and the next episode we really start to see some real superhumanity from the Hulk. Where before he was shown to be very superhumanly strong, but I think now we're getting some visuals in this episode specifically where we go, oh my gosh, that is what we would see in the Hulk comic.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very proud of that. You know, we're still not getting super leaps, which I don't understand, because they were doing super leaps in Wonder Woman at this time. I'm guessing that basically maybe Lou Ferrigno just did not feel as comfortable on the trampoline, or they felt that doing that kind of a jump would make the Hulk look too graceful. I don't know, but anyone who's watched Wonder Woman, as I have at this period in time, you know that super leap of Wonder Woman is really beautiful. It's great to watch, but I'm guessing maybe they feel that it just wouldn't have translated as well for the Hulk. I don't know, but anyway. So David's in the computer lab, and he's basically injecting himself with all kinds of chemicals to try and trigger a Hulk reaction. He's trying to watch his things, and he's trying to inject himself, which I think is a nice bet, because, of course, this is, again, you know, in the last episode, we had him looking for the cure with this Native American folk remedy. And here he is again. Now, the next episode, one assumes whatever he's looking at is probably based off of that, because they knew like the amino acid compounds in the fossilized leaf. So he's probably trying to recreate it chemically, you know. And so he's trying to see if this is going to work. Spoiler, it doesn't.
Okay. Yeah, that's my question. Unless I missed something, was there any reason he was in that lab other than to like just monitor his blood pressure? And couldn't he have done that in a more secluded place? And yeah, the machinery wouldn't have been so sophisticated, but I mean, couldn't he have got his hands on like a blood pressure cuff or something?
Yeah, you see, well, here's what I'm going to say on that is that you kind of hit this wall in this story where he's in there because we don't know what the data is until the final reveal.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm going to step out on a limb on this, maybe, and say that basically the data we saw was the data that he saw.
Yes.
But then after the Hulk out, he destroys the computer, and so whatever extra data there was lost.
Yeah, but what other information would there have been? He wouldn't have put his name in, at least not his real name.
No. Obviously that no. But yeah, it's a little weird that because but like I said,
because I mean,
that's when we get to the reveal at the end. It's it's very disappointing when we get the reveal at the end because it's anyway. So I guess okay. So spoiler for the very end. Yeah, it's basically his blood pressure reading is what's in the computer, which is a little side MacGuffin of this episode. Because this is meant as a Marky Post episode, a Marky Post and Jack Colvin episode, and a great Jack Colvin episode. You know, it's very interesting. You know, Marky Post basically, you know, she's coming in as an intern. I'm not sure what an intern was in 1979. I kind of assume it's not, you know, the slave labor that it is now. Although maybe it was a little, you know, well, I'm not exactly sure if this was meant to be more like a journeyman's position or even an apprenticeship position.
Well,
as you know, yeah.
Yeah, well, 1979, female intern. I'm thinking, you know, get the coffee, run this down the, you know, whoever.
Well, believe it or not, that's actually what interns are supposed to do.
Yeah.
Is run errand work. What the biggest problem in the world right now is that someone realized, hey, why can't we just make these interns do actual work and then not have to pay people to do their work, which led to a major lawsuit and all sorts of things in our modern world. But yes, originally what an intern is supposed to do is supposed to be a college student. Mm-hmm. I don't know how old Marky Post is here. She's a somewhat ageless kind of actress. You know, I think when she was younger, she looked older, and when she was older, she looks younger. So I'm not sure if if she is like 18 here, if she is a college student, or if she's actually, you know, in her 20s, maybe graduated and just trying to break into the business here. You know, just to get into the thing here, she makes this, you know, it was kind of an interesting interchange here because there's it's an interesting way that they play with the sexism in this series, at least in this episode. Because, of course, you do have Jack McGee immediately dismissing the fact that she's a female. No, which is their way of saying Jack McGee's not a chauvinist. He doesn't care that she's a female. Mm-hmm. And he's let her know by saying, hey, I could tell you're a female. Don't lead with, don't mention the obvious. But of course, at that same time, the fact that she is the first female lead in this, or like the first female editor of something, I believe she said she was, you know, it actually is an accomplishment. Mm-hmm. You know, that she was able by her skill alone to overcome all this prejudice. And what we see here, I think, is what you might call your classic mansplaining moment. Mm-hmm. Where basically, you know, Jack McGee is like, I don't care, you're a female, you're here, and Jack McGee thinks he's being all righteous and non-sexist about it. But of course, in truth, by dismissing the fact that by dismissing the existence of sexism, he is in fact being a pretty awful sexist in the whole concept. So, you know, I mean, it's this or that or the other, but I did think that was an interesting thing. And we do have this nice thing where Jack Colvin does toodle her in a bit. Basically, we have our Hulk escape. We have a nice bit of comedy in the bowling alley with the bowler who can't hear, and then this is our first real beyond superhuman action when Hulk throws the ball and the pins shatter.
Yes.
Now that, of course, is interesting, and we're going to see more of that as it goes on, at least in the next 2 episodes, because that's what I've seen so far. So we're going to see more of that, and that idea that, you know, the Hulk is is literally beyond just being Lou Ferrigno painted green. That there is a strength involved here that is beyond that. And I think we've gotten something of that in the past, but I think in the next couple episodes it really gets emphasized that this is something way beyond. And he throws the ball, it shatters, which is not physically possible, but it works for the story. And then the ball keeps on going like through the next wall and the next wall and the next wall, which is pretty awesome to watch. Now it's very interesting in this because, of course, Harold works in the computer lab, and they're a little sketchy on what he does in the computer lab. At first it seems like maybe he's a computer guy, although later when he actually describes what he does, he's mostly aroused about. So I'm not even sure what he was doing in the computer lab at that hour, except maybe to tidy up. Basically what happens is after the Hulk smashes everything, Harold, because I don't think anyone's actually even reported the Hulk yet, or no, they did report the Hulk, and that's why they go to this office, because apparently the Register has more than one office, I'm guessing, which is kind of interesting to note about the Register. They go to this other city. I think is this San Francisco or is this San Diego? Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. That's okay. It's not a big concern. They go there, and of course, because they're trying to find out about this Hulk sighting at the bowling alley, and then in walks Harold, and Harold decides to say he is the Hulk. And of course, Jack McGee says, "I've met the man who turns into the Hulk. You're not him." But
he can't recognize him as Banner, but he still knows it. That's not him.
Well, I mean, yeah, Bill Bixby versus Barry Gordon. It's not
but he can't remember Banner's voice or anything. I know. Suspension of disbelief.
It's been 2 years since he actually spoke to a guy he knew was David Banner.
Mm-hmm. It's
been over a year since he spoke to Banner in The Hulk Breaks Las Vegas. So it is understandable that, it's like he may get the inkling in his mind who that is, but the piece it directly back to Banner. You would think he might be more able to do that. Mm-hmm. But then again, I get this idea that I think there is this suspension of disbelief that we see in the characters. And I think that applies to everybody, that when they are faced with the implausibility of the Hulk, they do block out a lot of basically their minds shut down. They aren't able to form the logical conclusions. So like when you throw David Banner into a room and then the Hulk jumps out, in that moment you're not thinking, oh wow, David Banner must have turned into the Hulk. So for Jack McGee here, I mean, now he knows, oh wow, this guy turns into the Hulk. But to actually then retrace it all back to this idea that he knew the Hulk was David Banner, who he does think is dead, it's who's a guy who only met a couple times. So he knows there's something familiar about his voice even. Mm-hmm. Doesn't know what it is. And at this point, he just knows that that's the voice of the guy who turns into the Hulk.
And do you think there's some part of McGee, even on an unconscious level, maybe, where part of him doesn't want to catch David?
Well, that's certainly what the writers want.
Yeah.
No, I think, that's interesting, which we'll get to in a moment, because I don't want to get to that point until the very end of this, because it's like, why did that happen? Why did they think it was a good idea? Okay. But okay, so first things first. So Barry Gordon says, "I'm the Hulk," and Jack McGee's like, "No." But Mikey Post is like, "Oh, let's see what the guy knows. Maybe he knows something." And so Mikey Post goes, and of course she's a beautiful woman, and Barry Gordon is not a beautiful woman. Of course, he's more than happy to talk to Marky Post. Although, I don't know, it was a weird little thing there, because when he gets to his apartment, when Marky Post goes to his apartment, and man, what a different world it is that, oh, hey, well, then again, I guess that's how David Banner keeps getting these jobs. It's like, people just trusted moody loners back then. It's like, oh, this moody loner wants to go back to his apartment. what could possibly happen?
Oh yeah, because look, back then weren't people picking up hitchhikers a lot more than they do these days?
Yeah. It was a golden age if you were a serial killer. I tell you what.
Not,
Killers that we don't even know about.
not speaking from experience, are you?
No, I was 6. Okay.
You were advanced.
I was not a serial killer at the age of 6. I couldn't drive.
It's the only thing stopping it.
Yeah, by the time I got my license, goodness, it's like, it's much harder nowadays. Nobody wants to be a hitchhiker anymore. Although I did get picked up by this 30-year-old woman once when I was walking home from the mall, because she thought I was like, in my 20s. Because I was always, I was a very big, broad-shouldered kid. So she thought I was like this guy in my 20s. I was like, no, I'm a freshman in high school. And she was like, oh, she felt really? Oh, no. She was like, oh, this stopped being a dear Playgirl letter about 10 minutes ago. But yeah, that'll always be my happy memory of a older woman who once thought I was all that. Anyway, well, we were talking about the Hulk, I think, but it was back in the 80s, so it still fits with the podcast. Anyway, so she goes back to his apartment, and we find out that actually Harold has been apparently obsessed with the Hulk for a long time, because he's got this same map on his wall that Jack McGee described in the Mystery Man episode of, all the pins. Here's everywhere the Hulk's been. He's got all the Hulk clippings. This guy's been obsessed with the Hulk, which is why he knew, I guess, right, to go to Jack McGee. He's talking to Marky Post, and he's like, yeah, I was in the military, but it didn't work out, and then I came here. He's like, oh, you're into computers? Like, yeah, well, that's what I do. Now, of course, this is an interesting thing, I guess, in our modern world, if you're a guy who's into computers, obviously that's going to be a mark of intelligence. Here, it's just seen as sort of like his antisocial qualities.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Marky Post writes her own article based on her meeting with Harold, and submits it under Jack's name. And she feels real awkward at that moment, because then, because she's saying, hey, I think we should really look into Harold, see what he knows. And then basically Jack, off their first meeting, says, let me run you who he is. He's, and basically says everything that Harold said about himself. He was in the military, but it didn't work out. He's alone. He's moody. It's like, yeah, a little bit, that kind of stuff, maybe, But as it turned out, that the post she did write was very good. The editor likes it. We got the editor's name, or the publisher's name in this. I want to say it was Wheelhouse or something like that. And so, they like it. So now they have to figure out what it is. And Jack McGee, who's, being your, dog-eared reporter, says, we got to get back to the lab. If we can find weird, because he says if we can find evidence of the Hulk, we can force an investigation. I don't know how he's going to force an investigation. It's like, we're the newspaper. Let us in. It's like, you can't really force an investigation. But of course we do get from the head of the lab that he does not want Hulk publicity. He does not want his lab associated with the National Register.
Mm-hmm.
Because of course that is the thing we have there, is that nobody wants, people do not respect the National Register. This is simply the truth of it. Anyway, they, weirdly enough, which I guess again this is one of these things that dates a show, they give the name and address of the guy they're quoting here. Now, there is actually a practical reason for this, because at that point in history, to show that you didn't just make up all this stuff, you would list that kind of information, because then you could say, see, this is my citation. Mm-hmm. This is where he lives. He's a real person. At that point, no one thought, well, gee, what if everyone goes and calls this person, or starts harassing this person, or, God forbid, goes and attacks this person who just was witness to this crime. They don't do that anymore. But at that time, I think it was probably a little more standardized, or at least was being phased out. And Marky Post, who wrote the article, probably doesn't know you're not supposed to do that because she's an intern. Yada yada yada. Anyway, but that of course helps our plot along because then David Beeman can go and say, "Hey, I'm a reporter for View magazine, and we want to interview you about the Hulk." And of course, Harold, loyal guy that he is, well, I got kind of an exclusive with
National Register.
The Register. So he goes to talk to Jack and Jack and Pamela, and they say, he says, "Hey, I thought maybe you might have been trying to call me because my phone's been ringing off the hook with the one person who called." And they're like, "Nope, we did not call you. You're not a." He says, "But there's going to be a follow-up." He says, "Not with you." So real hurtful there, Jack, but I get your point. Moving right along, Harold Milburn says, "Fools, I'll show them all." Invites David Beeman to the bell tower on the north, where he says, "Come to the north corner of this street." Tells the Channel 6 News to come to the same north corner. Tells Marky Post to come to the same north corner. And when Beeman comes up, he calls him up to the tower, and basically you get that. David Beeman's trying to figure out if he did see the metamorphosis or not, if he knows who he is, and when he realizes he doesn't, he sort of gives him the cold shoulder, which basically makes Harold more depressed. Then Harold says, "Well, the Channel 6 News is coming," and Bixby's like, or Banner's like, "Oh, I gotta go." And then, of course, Marky Post comes up the stairs at that time, and then he's like, "Oh, okay, well, I'll," when she comes up, she talks to him for a bit. And for the life of me, I thought Harold was going to start shooting people from the tower, because that was a thing that happened back in the late 70s, early 80s. It did not happen in this. He's actually just going to commit suicide. David gets caught between going downstairs and upstairs because, of course, all the reporters are downstairs. And then, of course, when Harold is about to jump, he basically slips. He can't get back up. He doesn't want to jump at this point. But with the bells, because the bells ring and which has him fall. And that, of course, triggers the Hulk transformation. And this is where we get something that is so superhuman. We have not seen anything on this level before. The Hulk hits the bell, and the bell flies through the concrete walls to land on the ground. And that was just so impressive.
Oh, yeah.
So impressive for the Hulk. It was really a fantastic scene. It was exactly what we've wanted from these scenes for so long. And so that was amazing. Then we see basically, Jack McGee sees he's up there, says it's the Hulk. The Hulk saves, of course, Harold, because that's what the Hulk does. And then the Hulk, he picks him up and carries him to run off. Not quite sure why he's carrying him, but he's a Hulk. You got to give him some leeway. And this is where we say, does Jack really want to catch the Hulk? Rather than waiting on the ground with the net, when the Hulk clearly looks like he's going to jump down at this point, they decide they're going to run up all the stairs to throw it on the Hulk at the top of the building, rather than just waiting underneath and maybe moving around the building as the Hulk's moving around. So, but they run up to the top, they see where the Hulk runs to, they get to where the Hulk has already jumped down, they throw the net, but of course the Hulk sees them throwing a net and so runs off. That's pretty much the end of the Hulk. Then, of course, Jack McGee and Pamela Morris find the notebook. They ask Walter or Harold what it means. He says, "Oh yeah, that means a tape in the library." And for what it's worth, for fun here, one of my first grown-up jobs was as a tape librarian in a big mainframe computer. So that brought me back, that idea of finding the tapes in the thing, So they do get to the tape, and they find out that it's just someone monitoring his blood pressure. might have had a lot more meaning for David to see what the blood pressure was at that moment of transformation. Because I guess maybe what he was trying to do was trying to see what, like I said, what that moment of transformation is. What is his red line? Where does he have to keep himself from getting to? Which I guess is a very important bit to know if you want to control a Hulk. Marky Post explains that it wasn't that she passed up all these other things to work at the registers. It was that she wanted to work with Jack McGee. We still don't know why people have so much respect for McGee. I don't know if we're ever going to get that bit of backstory on McGee as to why there are all these people who look at Jack McGee and say, well, there's that those who really know him know that he is one of the great gumshoe reporters of the day. But we do know that people feel that way about him. So hopefully someday we'll get that explained a little better. Jack and Pam walk off, sort of chuckling as new colleagues with a greater respect for each other. And I do hope we see Marky Post again. I don't think we ever will. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to click on her right now to see if she ever comes back as Pamela Morris. Let's go down. 1979. Oh, she was in Buck Rogers. That was a good show. Semi-tough gangster. Man, where is she? It's incredible. No, only one episode was she ever Pamela Morris. So, again, this other great character that gets introduced, much like Rick Springfield in the previous episodes, who never comes back. I'm guessing back in that day they didn't tie you to like a 20-year Marvel contract like they do now. So by the time they came back for her, she was already doing Buck Rogers and all these other things, and then a bunch of other things came up, and they never were able to get her back. Unfortunately.
Sounds like a character screaming for a return appearance in the McGee Files.
Oh yeah, no, we'll get Pamela back. Don't worry. As soon as I did go to Google Docs. I did open a Google Docs as McGee Files. I just have to actually write what it in. You know, the problem with the McGee Files is I'm trying to decide, are these his reporter's notes? Should I do these in the form of a reporter's notes, or should this be his memoir of his adventures as Jack McGee? And I'm like trying to think of how I do think it's going to be a memoir style, because honestly, I think the reporter's notes might be a little hard for the average.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was gonna say, can you do it as a memoir, but every so often just break in maybe with like a quick article, like quote unquote article or whatever? Or...
Yeah, well, because what I'm thinking of, it's something basically the premise I have for the McGee Files right now is that it's going to be, because this is of course going to be a prose novel, because I can't draw, so it's not going to be a comic book. Although hopefully Marvel likes it and wants to make it a comic book. That's how you start these things nowadays. You have to like put it out there for free. Say, here's brilliant ideas. Someone take one. Hopefully someone with money takes one and then says, here's some money because we took your idea. Because that's the modern economy. Anyway, so the basic premise is that he's sitting, and because of course my first episode takes place during the first Lee Sung episode, which is second season. I believe was called Another Path. And we know that Jack McGee's in Miami. And so the idea is that that's where he first encounters the man thing. That's where he first encounters this other fictional Marvel universe, but that he has no evidence of. Because the basic premise for me is that what Jack McGee most wants is to legitimize the monster stories. Because, of course, the idea is that he joined the Register not to be the monster reporter, not to be the guy writing these crazy, silly stories, but he was the guy that was there to lend some relative credence to what they do, and that's why he was on the science beat. And we do see that he's working the science beat the whole time. It's Dr. Banner, it's the nuclear reactor, it's this alternate medicine of this Native American shaman for these horses. That's the beat he worked. But then he encounters something like the Hulk, and he realizes that if the Hulk can be shown to be real, that is going to prove to the world that the Register isn't just a gag paper that he works for, that he isn't working for a gag paper, that he is this real reporter doing real stories for this real paper, and that's what he wants to, and that's why he's doing these things. But when he encounters this story with the man thing in Miami, Florida, possibly Brother Voodoo, I'll see who I can work into it. And so these are the stories that he has no evidence of. And at some point it's probably going to be this loose idea that these are his notes that might one day become his memoir. And of course, I'm thinking, we'll meet Nick Fury, and that's where we're going to realize that there's someone covering up all of his. That's why he can't get evidence of any of this stuff, because there are people that are cleaning up the messes that these creatures leave. So, and of course, it will be David Hasselhoff, Nick Fury. Yeah, this is the dream, folks. I should start a Kickstarter, see who actually gives a crap. But anyway, that's enough about my nonsense. Phil, what did you think of this episode?
I liked it. It's one of our it was one of our things we look forward to, a big Jack McGee episode.
Well, this is the perfect Dave White episode. Again, two excellent Dave White episodes in a row. Heavy Jack McGee searching for a cure. That's the premise in both of these cases.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, what we actually get here is the actual search for a cure, because this is actually, it's not, oh, here's this miracle drug. It's okay. Let me get some baselines. Let me do the hard work of science. There's a funny meme out there, or actually it's a comic strip, about how someone says, "Oh, I love science," and the person says, "You don't like science. You like the big whiz bang discoveries. That's not science.
Mm-hmm.
You don't love science." And basically says, "You like science's voluptuousness," we'll say, because they use a cruder term. But what's cool about science is she's walking down the street, or he's walking down the street, and they say, "Oh yeah, I want me some of that science." And it's actually, here's all the work that had to go in to get to the science. Here's me sitting in a lab, taking my blood pressure, seeing what happens. No one cares about that. They just want to know, oh wow, that's how you get a Hulk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's the truth of science.
Oh look.
Yeah.
Look at this. Yeah. I was looking on the IMDb page under the Marky Post trivia. Did you know that she's the daughter of noted nuclear physicist Richard Freeman Post?
I did not know that.
Her father was a nuclear physicist. I guess he passed away last year.
Oh, God bless him. That's yeah. Well, that's cool, man. Maybe we'll have to work that in somehow. I don't know.
But I just thought that was, who among us can say their father was a nuclear physicist?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know all the people my mom was with. I know who she said it was my father, and I have every reason to believe that was him. Anyway, no.
It's been quite a week.
It always is. Yeah, they're giving the quotes where this was a good one about when David Banner goes to get into the tape library, and Heidi's not there, and
yes.
It says, "Oh, another doctor." Says she dated half the medical, and says, "Oh, well, I'm new here." He says, "Not for long." Says, "Who can I say is here?" Says, "Tell her the guy with the red Ferrari, the personalized license plates." And I just said, "Man, David remembers what it's like to be a doctor." Anyway, anything else to say about this episode, Phil?
No, I don't think so. I think that's pretty much it.
Now, this was a great episode. It was a lot of fun. It was a really great watch. I'm gonna have to sit down and actually watch it like from beginning to end. I always have to watch these things kind of piecemeal during my week, and this has been just a crazy week. I have not even read any of my comic books that I'm reviewing tomorrow with you, Phil. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. Yeah, it's been crazy. But I'll get it all done, man. I'll be here at 6:00 tomorrow. You and me, we're going to do comic books, including a DC review. But yeah, this was a great book. This is a great episode. I did watch most of the next episode. Great gag next episode about pea coats. So we're going to talk about that next week, and watch for it, kids. Okay, Phil, where can people find you if they want to talk to you or yell at you or say, you guys didn't even talk about the episodes. You talked about Charlie getting picked up by 30-year-old women in the 80s. What was that about? What can they complain to you about, Phil?
All I was going to say, if anyone wants to email us, please email us about these episodes. But no, seriously, if you wanted to talk about, Casanova Esser back in the 80s, or you can always email me, nightwingpdp@gmail.com. On Twitter, I am @nightwingpdp, and just check out all the many podcasts I'm on. Before the Bat, Legends of DC, and Charlie Esser and I do 2 shows for Nuff Said, the only Marvel Roundup and Super Connectivity. Check them all out and rate and review them, please, because that gets us attention. So please.
Yes, that's the thing. Rate and review this thing too, man. You listened, you heard. Go, there's a button to push on whatever thing you're looking at, and just go push.
No matter who's on it, you should rate and review any podcast you listen to.
Yes. Who cares? Even if you hated it, just give it a good review, man. We're dying here. This is a dying art form. It just started and it's already dying. We're like newspapers, except we never had that big National Register era. It's like podcasts. It's a thing. No, it's not. Or here's a thing, but no one's going to pay you for it.
It's not dying. It's metamorphosizing.
Yeah, like the Hulk. Okay, if you would like to talk to me about the business model of podcasts, about Incredible Hulk related trivia, or just about life, the universe, and everything, write to me at superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. And of course, every Saturday night at 7, I live tweet the Incredible Hulk on MeTV, and you can follow along with me as I do so at Charlie Esser. That's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle for quality. And of course, next week we start Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Legends of Tomorrow, and a bunch of other craziness. Trust me, you follow me, you're going to get your tweets worth. Okay, kids, that's our episode tonight. Thank you for listening. Please Hulk out with us again next week. Good night.
Good night, Casanova Esser.
We hope you've enjoyed this show. This podcast is part of the 80s Reboot Overdrive channel on Southgate Media Group. You can follow us on Facebook on the 80s Reboot group page. We're also on Twitter and Tumblr at 80s Reboot. We invite you to check out all the wonderful podcasts and blogs available at southgatemediagroup.com. And thank you for reliving the 80s.